Good morning, everybody, or evening, or whatever time it is, wherever you are. As with all these live streams, if you would like to introduce yourself in the live chat, that'd be awesome. Just to see where everybody's from, post what region of the world you're from, and I'm glad you could join me today. Or if you're watching after the live stream, I'm glad you could join me too, even though I can't interact with you that much. Today I'm excited because this is going to be the second to last live stream of this Drupal 7 to 8 migration series. Between last episode and today, I did a few kind of final touch-up things. I got my resume page working. It's the About page on my website. I did some CSS tweaks to make sure that CSS was all brushed up. I did a couple more little accessibility tweaks just to make sure colors and contrast was good and that elements on the page were rendering correctly. And it was just a lot of little cleanup things that sometimes when you're doing a migration, you don't even get the time to do those things at all. And in this case, I got the time to do it, so I might as well finish them off. And hopefully, we'll be cutting over to the new site, and the only thing you'll see different is some better contrast on the colors and a couple tiny tweaks to the layout. And other than that, it should be hopefully faster because it has less JavaScript for anonymous user access. And it should also be almost pixel accurate on everything, all the different elements on the page. So that's going to happen next week. And this week, we're going to do the final preparations, making sure we have a punch list for the migration so that we don't forget to do something on the day of the live stream, especially since on live streams, my brain kind of switches off of the rational mode and just goes into autopilot, and I can miss things if I don't have a punch list to go through. We're also going to test the manual migration steps because also with every migration I've ever done, there's some things that you just can't, well, you could automate it, but it would take hours to fix automation for something where it would just take 30 seconds to do it by hand. And if you had 100 of those things, that'd be a horrible experience. But if, in this case, I have like 5 or 6 steps that I need to do manually after the migration, it's not that bad. And I'd rather do that than spend an hour on one of these episodes doing something to tweak something that takes 5 seconds to do on a live site. But before we get into that, let me go to my screen share so you can see the agenda for the day. And also let me pull up my other window so I can see. Hans mentions a Canvy B-shirt. So yes, I every once in a while I pull out this. This is my old one. This is, I think, from 2009 or 10. Very old Netherlands jersey. I have a couple newer ones too. One of them I even had. It was a Father's Day gift my family got me. It has my name Geerling on the back. The Geerling family is from the very southern tip of the Netherlands, and I actually got to go there about 10 or 15 years ago. But my family bought me a shirt that had my name on the back and number 8, which was my number for everything I've ever done in terms of sports. And so that was really special for me. Of course, I've worn it so much now that the name has fallen off, but I think there's still a G and an N and a G on it. But anyway, sometimes I pop these on just because they're comfortable and I like them. Anyways, good to see everybody. One thing that happened also between last episode and today is the 2020 Drupal Development Survey results are now in. There was a presentation that Chris Urban and I used to work together at Acquia, and he's a really good project management person, and I would like to think a pretty good developer and architect, and we worked together on some really cool stuff. And so he and I have kind of a friendship that will continue on forever. And hopefully we'll keep doing these development surveys year after year so that we can keep tracking the progress of different tools in the Drupal community. But these are the main graphs. One of them is just showing the global audience. This year, it was more Americans than any other region by a longer margin. Usually we have a little bit more of a close match between America and Europe, but because we put out the survey right at the start of the whole crisis that shall not be named because it will demonetize me, I think we got a lot less in Europe because the survey was going on during those first 2 weeks that things were really ramping up. And we still got a good representation from other regions. I'd like to see more in the future. I know that there's a huge Drupal community in some of the other regions that we just don't tap into much. And it might just be we need some kind of ambassadors to spread the survey down there and over there. I don't think we even account for, I guess Oceania includes Australia, but I don't remember seeing too many results from Australia this year. One of the most interesting things to me was seeing these development environment results. Lando has kind of accelerated its growth and is now far and away the #1 solution that people are using for local Drupal development, which was a little surprising to me, but Lando has a lot of good marketing and a lot of good documentation and things. One thing that I have that's turned me off sometimes in the past is that Lando changes things a lot over major versions, and so you have to kind of keep your environment updated. That's one reason I mentioned that I didn't use it for this particular project, just because I'm pretty sure that this project is going to be 5 to 10 years long, that it'll be on the same code base, or maybe a Drupal 9 code base upgrade. But I don't want to spend the time to manage a local environment. I know that just the plain Docker file that I use is going to be pretty stable throughout that time. So that's why I chose that. But that doesn't mean it's a good choice for you. And using what a lot of other people use is probably a good choice. But still, a lot of people this year are using just Docker plain. They're using a Docker compose file or other way of managing a Docker container running Drupal. Doxel also had a little bit of a increase from last year. Doxel overtook Drupal VM as the #3 option. There's a little bit of a funny bit of data point. Acquia BLT, which was in the stats last year as well. Acquia BLT usually uses Drupal VM as the backend, so some of these results would probably be mixed in here, but even with that, it's interesting that the VM and Vagrant-based solutions have been falling off every year, and at this point, I think they're definitely a solid third place type choice compared to using any of the Docker solutions. And DDEV also had quite a bit of a jump this year, I think partly because it's used in so many community contribution sprints. So that was interesting to see. And I think that over the next year, Lando, Doxel, and DDEV will probably be the top 3 contenders in terms of new projects that people build. And they're all 3 well-maintained and have good maintainers who work on them. So I don't think if you make any of these choices up here, I don't think you're going to have a bad time at all. I think it's just different small trade-offs between either features and functionality or flexibility or maintainability, and sometimes it's worth it to make some of those trade-offs. It really depends on your project and your team. But like I said, for me, I'm just using Docker for this site, and it's not a bad choice. It's the #2 choice in the Drupal community right now. And there's some other things too. Most people that are doing Drupal development, especially Drupal 8 and 9, use PHP Storm because you benefit from having a full IDE. And a lot of people use VS Code as well now. It's really surged in popularity the past few years. And I still use Sublime just because I'm old-fashioned like that, I guess. But it's still the #3 choice, but it's now kind of going down to that next tier of Sublime, Vim, Atom, and a lot of other tools. But it's just interesting to see all these things. Finally, this is something that we'll talk about a little bit today with my site, but the hosting environments, customers own is by far the #1, and it has been for a couple years. And that just means whatever your customer chooses to host on, that's what you're hosting on. A lot of the people that fill out the survey are developers who work for a Drupal agency that builds lots of different sites. And a lot of times customers host their own stuff on Amazon or their own data centers. 2 jobs ago, the place I worked for, they had a massive data center, and they hosted all their Drupal sites in there on bare metal servers. That's something that still happens a lot. But obviously cloud hosting is the most popular overall as a segment. Acquia, Pantheon, AWS platform, DigitalOcean, all these different platforms. And it was also interesting just to see that Acquia and Pantheon are by far and away the 2 most popular services that offer Drupal specific cloud hosting. And then after that, there's Platform, Amazy, and Contigix kind of falling off in that, whatever that pattern is, a quadratic or exponential decay or something like that. But yeah, it's just interesting to see these things. And there's the full video is here, and here's Chris and I. This was back in DrupalCon forget what 2018 was in North America. Anyway, that was from that, and we'll hopefully do it again next year. There's also going to be a session at the Global Virtual DrupalCon that's happening in June that will be talking about local development. It's a local development environment panel with some of the maintainers, like I think the maintainer of DDev, myself, I do Drupal VM, and one or two others will be there to talk about some of the benefits and downsides of different environments and patterns and things like that. Anyways, I thought I'd mention that. There's a link to it from my site here. And again, this code base for my new website is all open source. Feel free to grab things from it and use them besides like graphic resources. Like don't copy my site entirely and start copying and pasting all my blog posts. But go ahead and grab anything from there. If you do a Drupal site and you want to take my theme and modify it a little bit, that's fine with me too. That's kind of how I operate, fully open source. And to that end too, I usually mention this on the Ansible live streams, but I have had 5 or 6 new GitHub sponsors this week, and it's awesome because my goal in life is to have a great family and do all the best I can do and all that. My goal in my career is that I can spend a lot more time on open source work and not have to do what I would call like enterprise development work as much. It's an interesting balance because you can't really do good open source work, I don't think, unless you have a basis in reality. So I still want to do client type work and enterprise level and also small business level and be able to have my hand in that water to be able to do good open source work. But I want to spend more time on the open source and people supporting me on GitHub and on Patreon and watching these YouTube videos and all that, and also subscribing right below me. You can hit the subscribe button. I believe I'm close to 10,000 subscribers. That would be a really cool threshold because I've had this YouTube channel since 2006. Didn't really spend much time doing anything on it until recently, but it's cool to see that subscriber growth. But anyway, if I can get these other things to be a little more self-sustaining, I'll be able to spend more time doing open source work and working on documentation for Drupal and Ansible and Kubernetes and other tools, and working on new examples and things and modules and plugins and operators. So thank you to everybody who supported me, and thanks for watching the stream too. To this week's video of the week. This one I had to dig deep. I actually ran out of the playlist videos that were the ones that are more popular Drupal songs, and now we're going to deep cuts of Drupal songs. So this is a short clip of it. It's actually like 12 or 13 seconds. Hopefully YouTube doesn't catch that and demonetize me for some reason. But this video of the week comes from Drupal Camp Florida 2013. So it's a little bit later than some of the other videos we've seen from the early aughts, 2008, 9, and 10. But it was pretty good too. It's a funny one.
Drupal in the morning, Drupal in the evening, Drupal is what I do. I love all my teammates, don't Drupal act is a zoo.
So I think that one is pretty good. Pretty good little parody there of the Drupal world of, if it's a little too complicated, you can hire me. That seems like how a lot of projects go, especially after if you ever worked in a Drupal agency or a Drupal shop that builds sites for other people, you often realize like you're setting up this complex behemoth sometimes, and the client usually doesn't have Drupal developers on staff who can deal with some of the crazy things that happen when you do Drupal upgrades and such. And so they're going to have to retain you forever. And that's one reason why Drupal developers are in high demand is, some people say Drupal is complex and Drupal's hard to use. And to a certain sense, that's true. But it's also the sites that we build with Drupal are typically a lot more complicated than sites that you might build with WordPress or another tool. That's not always true, obviously. And there's plenty of WordPress sites that are also complicated and convoluted sometimes. But I think that the fact that we build such elaborate sites and with deep integrations with other tools and a lot of customizations, that makes Drupal sometimes hard to use and hard to upgrade, but you don't get that way without also having a complex site that has a lot of requirements that you might not be able to build with other tools. Anyway, so it's always fun. It seems that a lot of the Drupal type songs have fallen off over the years. Maybe even the music for open source projects has fallen off a little, because I noticed there's not any Ansible songs, there's not any Kubernetes songs. Maybe we could change that someday, we'll see. But anyway, we have gotten past all that, and I wanted to start working on the final migration steps. One of them is to test a fresh migration, make sure that the steps, so I have this issue called manual migration steps, and over the past few months, after the past month, I guess, 29 days ago, I started adding these in every time I ran into an issue where I'm like, that doesn't look right. And then I found out, oh, the migration is actually overwriting something. I need to un-overwrite it once the migration is complete. For example, in Drupal 8, in Drupal 7, this wasn't a problem because the way that configuration was exported with features and blocks, it wasn't something we ran into that much. But in Drupal 8, the problem is that there's a custom block that goes here. And every time you place a custom block, that placement gets a UUID, a universally unique identifier. And what happens is when I migrate the site, or when I install the site, the UUID is there, but it was created after I did the migration. And so that UUID can't be matched up to something in Drupal 7, so the migration can't map the block to the right place. So there's a block here and a block here that don't exist. There's some modules that can help with this if you want to automate the process entirely. Another option that I've done on some migrations is you can actually build a custom module that has the blocks markup and code in it, and then install that module, and then those modules or those blocks appear correctly. But in my case, there's just 2 blocks. I didn't want to spend the time to automate that. So what I'm doing here in the first step is recreating these 2 blocks, and I'll make sure that this works correctly. So there is what I do right here. I'm going to remove it. If I don't remove it, then the new block will have a new identifier. And the identifier for this block is like what I do, all lowercase, no spaces in between. And if I create a new one, it'll be like what I do _1, and that could break my CSS because unlike a good Drupalist, I just use the default markup that Drupal spits out to do my theming. So I'm going to remove this block, what I do, and I'm going to replace it with what I do, or what I do. Place, and then make sure it's only, don't display the title, make sure it's only on the front page. Save it. And another thing I noticed, is this in here somewhere? This is not in here. Another thing I noticed with the latest migrations is as every time I did a migration, the block weight would change. It would like increment by 1 or decrement by 1. And so now the main page content for some reason is above the title and tabs. So after I do a migration, if I go to a blog post, for instance, the page content will be up here and the title will be down here. And that's completely wrong. So I need to add this to the list. This is one reason why we do these punch lists. This way I don't forget this the day of, and then all my pages are messed up. Change the block layout order. So what is it? Main page content is below primary admin actions. All right. So we did that. I'm going to drag this down here. And then I'm going to save this, and then now I have to replace the footer block as well. So this is another custom block. Remove it. Akram says, Kubernetes is a nightmare to learn. How true is that? I actually have a post on that. What is it? Kubernetes beginner, something like that. Yeah, Kubernetes complexity. This was something I wrote early in my experience learning Kubernetes, just talking about how, a lot of people are like, oh, Kubernetes makes everything easy. It's like, yeah, if you ran a platform as a service with thousands of servers and hundreds of services and all this stuff, yeah, it might make that easier. But if you're coming at it from like, I kind of barely know Docker to like, oh, I'm installing Kubernetes and using it, it's not that easy. It definitely has good use cases, but it's not something for everybody. And I wrote a bit about kind of my experience with that, and the dissonance between it's super hyped and super amazing and everybody's throwing tons of money at it, but that doesn't mean that it's the right solution for everyone. And it also doesn't mean that it's easy to learn or easy to pick up or makes a lot of sense early on. You have to learn a lot of things. It's a lot like Drupal. It's not the right fit for everything. Some people, I have over here my Maslow's hammer, the golden hammer. If you don't know, the law of the instrument is what his law is. And it's saying, like, you know, if you have a tool like this golden hammer, you're going to apply that tool to everything because it's the tool that you have. We can run into that problem with Drupal, we can run into that with Kubernetes, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, that is to say that Kubernetes is a nightmare to learn, and it takes a while. And that's another reason why Kubernetes also is something where there's a lot of demand and not as many developers who are really good with Kubernetes right now. Okay, so we remove the footer block. I'm going to place it again, footer. And then there's also a footer menu that's there by default, but I need to make sure to put in the custom block. And I'm going to put that with no title, and it's on all pages, save block. Make sure it's at the bottom, save that. Now if I go to the home page, I have this about block and the footer block down here, which I forget who, I think it was Hans earlier that mentioned. I'm wearing my my Netherlands shirt. If you'll notice, the Geerling family crest, this is part of the Geerling family crest. It has the Dutch orange color with the river, because I believe we were somewhere around where the river was, the Geerling family, down there by, what is the border touch, Germany or wherever it is. Anyway, the point of that is this is part of our Geerling crest, and I like our crest, and the Geerling family that I'm in, it's a really big, huge family. A lot of family bonds and ties. We get together a lot. Well, right now we're not getting together a lot, but usually we get together a lot. So it means a lot to me, my family, and so I wanted to put the crest on my website. Anyway, so that's there now, but there's another step here. So I fixed that, edit the contents. So one thing that I did in Drupal 7 is if I go to that block, custom block library, what I do and edit this block, it used the path sites / and then site name / files. So I had a multi-site set up in Drupal 7, and I'm switching from doing that to having a single site per code base for Drupal 8, mostly because I've moved a lot of those Drupal 7 sites to static hosting, or some of the people that I helped them with their websites, they moved on to services like Wix or Squarespace. I'm not sponsored by them, by the way, but they moved on to one of those services. And so I don't really have the need for that multi-site setup anymore. So for Drupal 8, I went to sites / default files. So what I did was I added a redirect. So if I go to this, if I go to localhost / that, let me remove that second slash. If I go to localhost / sites / jeffgeerling.com, it's going to redirect me to sites / default files. But I don't want those redirects to happen. If I leave this code like this, then that redirect is going to happen every time someone loads my home page. And even if that's cached, it's annoying to have to do that. So I put into, for that redirect, I put into htaccess default, this redirect right here. Redirect request from that to that. And that's in a commit somewhere far back if you want to ever take a look at it. But what I want to do is change this to sites default files, and that way this won't have to redirect every time that it loads the page. So I'm going to save that, and I'm also going to edit the footer block because this one has the same path there, default, save, and if I go home, it should still show them, so that's correct. Edit the footer, that's what I did. And also on my local environment, I did this a few weeks ago, so it's still there. But this file down here, this little crest, is not actually in Drupal's file database table. It's not, I never uploaded it attached to anything. I just kind of dragged it up to my server, copied it by SFTP. And so when I do the final migration to the live server, I'm going to need to manually copy that file. So I have a step in here to do that as well. Add a link to the About page. So right now, these two links come from views. So they're in the configuration that's exported and imported with the site. I'm going to add one more link manually. And I could do this a lot of other ways. And I was going to add a little migration for the menu item, but I was like, yeah, it's going to take 30 minutes. I can just do this afterwards. So I'm going to say About. And I'm not adding a menu. What am I trying to do? Structure, menus, main menu, add link. About, that's not how you spell it. Slash about, main menu, weight of 1, so it's at the end. And now if I go home, I should have an about link right there. And my about page, I mentioned earlier, I just made sure the CSS was working correctly. And there's a tiny bit of JavaScript on the page. So if I go down to my experience section, there's a little JavaScript that makes this show and hide. It's kind of stupid, but it's not stupid. It's kind of cool, I guess. I like animations. This is the most animated my website gets. So anyway, I had to throw in the jQuery library on that. I think I mentioned it last week too. But the resume page or about page is working correctly now. And there's a print style sheet. So if I go to print this, you'll notice that, let me open a PDF. You'll notice that a lot of the elements are gone, like the menu and the, I don't think there's a page title. If you're not logged in, obviously these things won't show up. But I have the little submenu down there is gone, and it prints out everything, including all the bullet points. This is still not a great resume because it's like 4 or 5 pages, and it should be 1 or 2 pages tops, but whatever. I haven't had to use the resume in a while, so I'll brush that up some other time. So we added that link, toggle comments display. So this was another funny thing. In Drupal 7, there's no, let me go to a post with comments. Comments. Here we go. So here's a post with some comments, and I want to see this comments thing at the top just to show like, oh, we're in the comments section. Otherwise, it's not obvious. You know, it's somewhat obvious, but I want to make sure that's there. And if I go to localhost, the way that this works in Drupal 8 is a little different with the display of comments. And by default, it migrates it to not have the comments label there. So I have to go back in here. And I could fix this in the migration, but I didn't want to spend the time to figure out what the key was to override it and all that. So I'm going to go to content types, blog post, manage display. And then if I go to comments, I just want this label to be above the comments list. Save that, and now it should be there right here. So now it looks the same as Drupal 7, and that's wonderful. I also made sure, and this is something a lot of people forget, if you go to the comment reply form itself, you need to make sure that this is themed correctly so that the comment reply form is working. If you don't do that right, then you might get to the wrong section on the comments page. Let's see, so that was that. And close that. So I did that. So delete the search index. So that's another one that I might actually have to do a little work because the Drupal 8 search API module might or might not be able to drop the full index. Let me go here and see what it's saying. So this is saying it's indexed. But there are 12,000 items. I think what's happening is every time I reinstall the site, it adds to the index and it never actually clears the index. So you can re-index from this page and clear all the index data. The funny thing is I don't think this actually clears the data out of Solar. It should, but I don't think it is because I've been doing that and it didn't do anything. There's also, if you go to the server itself, it shows you that how many items there are, and this has just been increasing every time I do this. And then if I say delete all index data on the server, I click confirm, and it doesn't seem like it actually does it because it's still there. And if I wait 2 minutes, it'll still be there. So I don't know if that's like a bug in, well, now no, it's still there. I don't know if that's a bug in the module or if it's a setting on hosted Apache Solar that's not quite right. I don't know what's going on there, but you should be able to clear the index data on the server from Drupal. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and, where's my search API? I'm going to go ahead and reindex everything anyways because it's in my list. And what I'll probably do on the day before is clear the index from hosted Apache Solr, which I can do. And then I'll go back to the site and, well, now it's saying there's 0 because I guess that just clears it on the site. It doesn't, well, that's weird. Now it's saying there's 9,400 items. So it did something. Anyway, it's interesting. But I'll go ahead and index everything right now because it's in my list. And we'll let that run. And then after it's done, we'll test it out by doing a couple searches. So I did that. Test that search works. We'll put a pin in that until this is finished. Regenerate the XML sitemap. So that's another thing that I have. If I go to jeffgeerling.com/xmlsitemap.xml, that is not actually working. What is it? XML site? Oh, sitemap.xml. So if I go here, I get the sitemap that has every link on my site, and I believe there's 2 pages. No, there's just 1 page on this. The new site, I have it broken up into multiple pages just so it loads a little quicker. And so I need to make sure that I generate that, and that is under search and metadata, simple XML sitemap, and rebuild queue and generate. Hopefully that doesn't blow up this process that's going because it's going to use another queue. But we'll see. I can see my processors are doing having a fun time. And before anyone asks, this is called iStat menus. It's a cool little process for the Mac that lets you monitor all different aspects of your computer through the little menu bar thing here. And my computer is going a little crazy, I think, right now. Oh, it looks like that worked. So it finished building that, and if I go to sitemap.xml, here it is, 3 pages, click on page 1, and it should show all that stuff, which it does. All right, so that worked, and obviously I'll need to do that on the live server after I switch to the new domain, because otherwise the sitemap will have like localhost or d8.jeffgeerling.com or whatever the domain is that's not my final www domain. So I'll do that on that day, and then I'll have to check it and make sure it works. This is still going, taking forever, but it's almost done. All right, so then the other thing that I need to do, I don't want to do this now because it's localhost. Google can't index my localhost. But I'm going to go to this page and make sure that the submission is done. And I think that that's done through cron. So basically I would run cron, and this page should get updated to have the last submitted date for that. So that's good. This is indexed. Let's check the index really quick to see. It says that they're all indexed and there's 12,346 items. Looks good to me. I'll go and test the search by searching for Ansible because I know there's a lot of Ansible content. And that is not looking quite right because there should be a lot more. There's obviously more stuff in here, but I think these are from those duplicate entries. And it says it found 743 results, but only 2 popped up here. Yeah, something's funny with that because it's only showing a couple per page. I think the problem is that the Solr search index has all these duplicate entries, so I'm definitely going to have to fix that bug. So I'm going to go to my punch list, which I'm getting a slight bit ahead of myself, but I'm going to go in here and say prior to live stream, delete and recreate index on hosted Apache Solr, because otherwise we're going to have that same issue. It is getting search results, but it's mixing in all the duplicates that don't show up on the Drupal site because they don't exist on the Drupal site. And so the page is only showing like 2 of 10 results because the other 8 are duplicates. And you can see here by the numbers, this should not be 59. This should be like 12 or 14 or something like that. So search works, but I have those duplicates, and I'd like to figure out why it won't clear the full index on when I try doing delete site index in the Solr search API module. All right, so we did that. Verify cron is running. That's something that I will have to do on the server itself, and that kind of takes us into the next step of this. First, I'm going to make sure if I go to localhost, I'm going to do some comparisons. So I'm going to grab this page, home page here. I'm going to go ahead and log out. Where's the log out? So that I'm seeing it here, and then I'm going to go to jeffgeerlin.com and log out there. And these should be almost identical. You can see there's a few pixels difference on the new site. I actually touched up the distance here to make it visually a little bit more even. But other than that, these pages look the same except for the contrast, so that's good. Make sure that the bottom of the page looks the same. It does. But again, you can see like the top of page thing here. It's harder to read on the old site. On the new site, I added more contrast to make it a little bit better. Now I'll go to the About page and make sure things are pretty close there. So you can see that, again, there's a few minor spacing differences here. Some of them are intentional, some of them are not, but it's close enough. And then let me make sure that like clicking on things down here works, clicking on these works the same. So that's good. I'm going to go to the projects page, make sure that that's pretty close. Just doing some final checks. Again, spacing differences. Actually, the old site looks slightly better, but that's one of those things that I could probably spend 3 or 4 more hours tweaking every little CSS rule, and this is good enough. Let me go to one of the projects and make sure that they're similar. Again, this was something I mentioned in a previous episode. These image cache thumbnail generation actually takes a bit of CPU power on the server. And if you have lower memory limits or things like that, sometimes the first time a page is loaded with multiple thumbnails, it won't load them all. So if you refresh again, it usually pops in there because it loads the second time. Just a little Drupal thing that you might be like, oh my gosh, it's not working at all. It's like, well, it's working, but there's sometimes weird memory issues. But this looks the same, almost. If I click on it, it does the same thing. Someday I'll go back to using a color box, but right now I didn't want to do the Drupal 8 color box module, which was kind of a little bit janky. And somebody is saying hi from Beijing. Hi, Martin. Good to see you. Hopefully you're doing well. And and as Akram says, you missed the hammer from earlier. I'll show it again. This is my golden hammer. That it's my Drupal or Ansible or something where you can be tempted to use something you know just because you know it, even if it's not a good solution for something. Just like an electrician will often have a linesman pliers, which I don't have one with me right here. It's slightly like this guy. This is a little crimp tool. But anyway, he'll use the linesman pliers as a hammer just because he has it with him and he knows it really well. Kind of an inside joke for electricians, but similar but a little bit different, I guess. Anyway, so this is the same. Let me go to the blog page, make sure it's looking good. Again, just a little spacing difference. If I scroll down and look at this post with the comments, let me go to that comments link. Make sure it goes, the comments are almost identical. Just again, very slight difference in spacing. And if I do a comment reply, let's hit reply here and hit reply here. So those are the same almost, just slight differences. And if I go to, let's see, I'm going to go to a really old blog post. I can go to comment reply 1, or is it comment reply 1? Comment 1, something like that. Okay, so I'm going to go to the comment/1. That goes to the oldest comment on the site and make sure that that page is working well, because I found a bug in Drupal's, excuse me, I have hiccups. I found a bug in Drupal's migration that when you do the migration and you go from Drupal 6 to 7 to 8, Drupal 6 didn't have some of the language data that Drupal 7 had, and Drupal 8 has a different language structure than Drupal 7 had. So some of the comments would not appear, and I found that the reason was because those were comments that had come from Drupal 6 to 7 and then were upgraded to 8. Those comments didn't have the language and the format that Drupal 8 expected, and for some reason that caused them just to not display. The data was in the database, but the language was not. So I set it, I went into my Drupal 7 site and just updated all those old comments to have the same UND or undefined language setting instead of English, and everything worked at that point. So that's good that these are working. Now let me go to a tag page, make sure tags are looking right. That's pretty close. Again, just spacing. Can't think of anything else that I want to look at right now. Search, Ansible. Obviously the search results are slightly different, but let me go down here. Let's see, Ansible. There's the old and the new. You can see I fixed that bug on the new Drupal 8 version. You can't even see this in dark mode. In Drupal 8 on the new site, you can see it, and there's good contrast, so you can see it a lot better. And this all works the same, but you just can't see it that well. One thing that I was a little sad about is that you can't get, I couldn't find a way to get this performance results for the search. I do like seeing this because I actually use my jeffgeerling.com website as kind of a test bed for hosted Apache Solr improvements. And there was a time when it took 0.5 to 1 second to get the search results, and I got that down to around 0.25 to 0.4 seconds. I'm always a little bit nutty about performance, and that's also why my website doesn't use Google Analytics or any of those kind of tools, because I find it can load a lot faster if you don't load anything external with it. I use a thing called Fathom Analytics, which is a self-hosted tool that you can host on your own domain and let you have results that you don't get the depth that you get with Google Analytics, but it's also a lot more privacy conscious. Doesn't require cookies, that kind of thing. Doesn't track people all over the web. But anyway, little aside there. And I have a post on my blog if you search for Fathom on how I set that up and how I'm running it. But that looks good. Everything is looking good here. I think we're ready for the final migration on the final site. The next step is to build a test instance. That my plan is to, I'm going to take my existing site, jeffgeerling.com. On the same server, I'm going to set up a separate instance called d8.jeffgeerling.com. So you could go to d8, and I won't have a certificate for it yet. But you'll go here and see the new d8 site, and I can do a comparison between the two. And I'll have that for the next week, and I'll do another one of these rounds of just testing everything to make sure it's working. And then next week when we do the final migration, we'll basically clear out the database on that, change the settings, do the full migration, do the issues, the steps in number 55, and then change this to www and drop the old www code base out of the picture. That way, one thing that's often a problem with migrations is DNS. So if I go to DNS checker, and this is something you can see a lot when you do one of these migrations, you have to plan for at least 24 hours, usually 3 to 6 days before most parts of the world can see your new site if you change the DNS. So let's say you move from one server to another, or if you move from one region in AWS to another and you have to change IP addresses. If you do that, you have to update the DNS, and even if your DNS is set to 5-minute lifetime, or I forget, the 5-minute TTL or 60-minute TTL, most DNS providers, like local ISPs and things like that, don't actually update their records for, could be a long time. And there's a lot of devices, like in-home devices, that might be caching DNS routers and things, and they can cache it for a day or 2 days or sometimes a week. Some really poorly programmed ones can cache your DNS for a month or two. And so the problem is you cut over your site and the old site is still being hit all over the world. And you're like, what is going on? I already did the DNS. I had the TTL set to 5 minutes. It's something you have to live with and plan for. And there's a few different ways to handle that. One is to have your old site kind of proxy the new site. So leave up your old infrastructure and have it set up Varnish or Nginx or something and have it proxy the new site so that anybody getting to it from that old server will get the new site on the new servers. That's not very optimal. Another way is to have to throw up a page on that old site, just a static web page that says like, hey, you're hitting our old site. Please refresh your DNS or something. I mean, most people that hit that probably have no idea what that would even mean. But it happens. And another option is to run the old site, just keep it live for a week or two or something in parallel, and just maybe put a notice at the top like, this is an archived old version of the site. Please please try accessing it from another device or another network or something, and to get the latest version. I don't know. There's really no great way to deal with that other than to try to make sure that you're using elastic IP addresses or using a system that lets you use a CNAME for the DNS instead of an A record. But anyway, what I'm going to do to mitigate that is just use the same server with the same IP address. It's a DigitalOcean VPS. And hopefully Drupal 8 will not bring that server to its knees. It has 2 gigabytes of memory. And this site is very low weight, low effort. So, and everything is cached by Nginx for anonymous traffic. So it should be able to cope. We'll see about that. But I'm going to test this. So I have, as with all of my other infrastructure, this server that runs my jeffgeerling.com, it also runs midwesternmac.com, which is probably the most I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world to use Drupal for this, but this is definitely a brochureware site. There's really no reason to be using Drupal on it, besides the fact that it's nice to be able to edit it on the road, I guess. But I used to blog on this site until I realized I just want to run one blog, jeffgeerling.com. So I migrated all the posts from Midwestern Mac's website into jeffgeerling.com, and this site is basically a static site. It advertises the 2 services. It advertises all the Drupal things that I do through Midwestern Mac. And it has a contact form. There's some other things that I don't maintain as much anymore, but anyway, my site is on a multi-site Drupal 7 install with Midwestern Mac's code base. So eventually I'm probably going to migrate this to something else static. But I'm going to go into the configuration for the server, which is an Ansible playbook. So let me open a new window here. I'll make it bigger. And I'll say cd that's where it is, and I'll open this up. And as a good Ansible user, I don't have any of my passwords in here in plain text, so I'm safe showing this stuff off. This is basically the entire configuration for the server, including all the passwords, but the passwords are encrypted, so good luck decrypting that. If you have a quantum computer or you're the NSA, you might be able to, but you've probably already been monitoring everything I do and say anyways. But anyway, so this is the configuration for the server, and the way I have it set up is this is the main playbook. It includes some variables, it sets up the server, some of the basic tools, and then it runs all these Ansible rules. And if you don't know anything about this stuff, I actually have another series called Ansible 101 that I've been doing live on this same YouTube channel. So you can go back to that episode 1 and learn about how to do all this stuff. But this is the playbook that sets up this particular server. It has a firewall. It sets up MySQL and Nginx and PHP. It uses Drush to do the Drupal deployment and updates and cron and things. And I have backups configured, and I have certbot for free SSL certs that are updated every month or so. And I have some security customizations to make sure the server's a little bit locked down. And then I have a section here that deploys the website. So up until now, if I go here, this only deploys a Drupal 7 code base. And that's the code base that has jeffgeerling.com and midwesternmac.com and a couple other small sites that I help people maintain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have a Drupal 8 website on the same server. And so there's 2 parts to it. One is it has to deploy the code base into the server. And the other is it has virtual hosts set up for each one of these. So each virtual host has a few settings here. And I'm going to copy and paste this one for Jeff Geerling. And we'll make one called d8.jeffgeerling.com without a redirect. And the doc root will be /Drupal8. And I'm going to not have SSL enabled right now. So I'm going to put that in there. Another thing I need to do is edit the MySQL databases and add one for this, but I cannot show you that. So let me, I'm going to take this window to my other screen really quick, and I will secretly do this. And while I'm doing this, you could chat about what you think I'll have the password be. Let's see. So I need to use Ansible Vault edit. What is the file in here? vars/MySQL. MySQL dot, what is it? YAML. Okay, and then I'm going to add a database for, I'm going to call it Jeff Geerling D8. Jeff Geerling D8. And then I need to add a user for it. Host. All right. Dot star all. Sorry, I can't show you this stuff, but then you'd have my database password, and that would be no good. No good at all. And I need to generate a password, so I'll use one password for that. Let me do that on a different screen so that you can't see it, because it would be silly for me to show you this password. Okay, got the password. And whoops, I'm in Vim, not Nano. Sometimes when I'm in Vim, I start using Nano shortcuts. Excuse me. And it starts confusing me a little bit. Save that. I'm sure somebody's probably seeing, like, can I see the reflection in his eye of that password and enhance it? Use that zoom and enhance feature and grab it that way. But no, whoops. Right and quit. Okay, so I have that database set up, and I'm going to go in here and come over here, and I have a database. I have what else? I have the virtual host set up, and then what I want to do is I'm going to also make sure that I have a Drupal 8 folder in here, and then I'm going to make sure that Drupal, so I have two code bases now. And what I'll do is I'll add a loop here with items, repo, dest. So the dest here will be that, and the repo is this. Oops, need a space there. And then the second one, repo, will be here. And yes, I'm working from master. That's probably not the best thing in the world, but works for me. It's my personal site. What you gonna say? Dest will be this. Drupal 8. So it should clone the code base into the Drupal 8 directory. Then I need to change these because I now use a list of items. So I'm gonna say item.dest is this. And then the repo is item.repo. So now Drupal, or Ansible, is going to make sure the Drupal 7 codebase is checked out into the Drupal 7 folder, and the Drupal 8 codebase is checked out into the Drupal 8 folder. They're going to use master. If you're working on a more important website than my personal website, you probably want to deploy a tag, and so you'd have a tag for each of these, and you'd use that. But I'm not going to set up a cron job for it yet, just because I don't know exactly how cron's going to work on the global Drush install. I might have to set up a different cron job for the Drupal 8 site. So go ahead and save this, and we'll run the playbook, and we'll see if it finishes before time is up. Let's see, Ansible playbook, playbook.yaml. And this is going to do all those settings that I just did. It'll reapply everything that's set up already, and it will then it will run through this deploy playbook and make sure the code is there so that Apache can start serving it. And I don't think, that this episode is just about over. We have 5 or so minutes left. We'll see if this finishes by then. And if it does, then I can at least show you that it's serving up requests to d8.jeffgeerling.com. But if not, we can keep moving. Actually, I forgot. I need to also point d8.jeffgeerling.com at the server, because it won't work at all if the DNS is not pointed there. And actually what I can do, instead of doing it through my DNS provider, I can edit my hosts file. I don't know if there's anything private in here, so I'll do it on the other screen. But I'm going to edit the etc/hosts file. And I'm going to point, let's see. Actually, there's nothing secret in here. so I can show you. So I'm going to point, this is another thing that I do a lot with migrations. Instead of changing the DNS publicly and letting the public see your site and potentially get indexed by Google, I can point just d8.jeffgeerling.com at my server. I'm going to say ping, what is it, jeffgeerling.com, just to grab the IP address, which is right here. So I'm going to put that in here and say d8.jeffgeerling.com. And if I ping d8.jeffgeerling.com, it should be pinging that server. So now when I go in the browser and I try accessing d8.jeffgeerling.com, it'll be requesting that server. And for anybody watching this stream, you can do the same thing in your host file, and it'll be sending requests to the server the same way. So once I have the site set up, you could browse the site at that URL. Anyway, let's see if this playbook is getting near finishing. It's on Munin right now, which is down here. So it already did the Nginx changes, adding the virtual host. And now it's working on admin accounts. It did MySQL. Let me make sure that it didn't output any passwords, because you never know. Sometimes with these older playbooks that I have, I didn't do everything exactly by the book. Ensure the presence. Okay, so it's not good. So you can see the database name, but it's not printing the passwords out in the output. Sometimes I put in a debug thing in my old playbooks, and you'd be able to see the actual password in the output, which is horrible. But in this case, I'm not doing that, so that's good. So here we go. Couldn't do that. So this is a problem. This is just an Ansible configuration thing. It's on the server, it's trying to clone from GitHub, but it can't do that because I'm using a public key. What I can actually do is go down here to, where's the deploy? Deploy. I can actually use the HTTP URL for now. I'll change it when I go live. This doesn't require authentication, so I'm going to do that. And then I think I have a tag that I can run for deploy. No, I don't. Let me add one. Tags, deploy. Okay, so I'm going to do that with tags equals deploy. So this is just going to run those last deploy tasks. And let's see if that does it. Okay, so it clones the code base, and then I'm going to say Ansible all-i inventory. No, Ansible, what is the host here? What is it? -m service -a name equals Nginx state equals restarted. I have to restart Nginx to make sure it picks up those virtual host changes, and that's not good. Oh, I have to use -b for sudo because I can't restart it as Jeff Geerling. Hopefully this doesn't blow up my server and bring down my live site, because if it does, I'll have to end live stream early. Oh, that's annoying. So if I go to jeffgeerling.com, it might be down right now. It is. So I just messed up my configuration. It happens sometimes. But I think I will end the live stream at that point, just so I can bring up my web server again. That's the fun of doing live streams. You can accidentally bring down your website during the live stream in front of everybody. Someone is also asking about using images instead of servers. And yeah, things like what I just did can be prevented that way. My site's still down right now. I'll get it up in a few minutes. But it also is a lot more of a pipeline that you have to build. And for my personal site, I haven't gone that way yet. What I'm going to probably do in the next few months is start using Kubernetes cluster and having all my sites run in them with Docker containers. I already have the setup in my repo here for a Docker file that builds a production-ready image that I can then store in a registry and deploy into Kubernetes, or even somewhere else just running Docker by itself. Or Podman if you're using a Red Hat-based system. Well, the Podman doesn't run the containers. But anyway, I'm going to probably do that at some point. I don't have the time right now to set all that up, and I already have the server running and it has everything. And it's so easy to change. In fact, you just change something and it just turns off the server. It's great. If you shut down your website, you have no need to do anything, because the traffic will just go to a black hole. But I'm going to end it there so that I can go back and make sure my website's actually working. And once I do that, I'll kind of clean up other things. But as with all the other episodes, I would love if you would want to see more of this stuff, if you'd subscribe below or consider supporting me on GitHub or Patreon. You can also follow me on Twitter. I have all these little links here, Gearling Guy. Just search for Gearling Guy if you want to find me somewhere. Thank you for watching, and if you're interested again in more of the automation stuff that I do with Ansible, tomorrow's live stream will be talking about Ansible testing with Molecule, testing your playbooks on GitHub Actions. So even if you're not using Ansible, I'm going to talk a bit about GitHub Actions and how you can do CI with that with your code bases. And we also covered that in the Drupal site as well. We're using GitHub Actions here to do some Drupal testing. So join me tomorrow for that if you'd like. I am going to end the live stream and fix my website so that it's not down right now. Next week we'll probably bring it down even more. It'll be very exciting. Can't wait for that. Hopefully you'll come back for that, and I'll have a party celebrating my website's massive amounts of downtime after having months of 99.99% uptime. See you later, and hope you're having a good week.